Welcome everyone, and thank you for joining us for today's webinar, The Key Reason Why Your Data Governance Program is Failing. A couple housekeeping items before we get started. You will be on listen-only mode. If you have any questions during today's presentation, feel free to submit them into the chat window and our team will get back to you within the next 24 hours. This webinar is also being recorded, so if you have any technical difficulties or would like to re-watch the content on a later date, we will be sending out an email with the slide deck and recording over the next couple of days. My name is Mary Ann Warner, and I'll be kicking things off. A quick introduction to who we are. CCG helps organizations become more insight-driven, solve complex challenges, and accelerate growth through industry-specific data and analytics solutions. We empower customers to gain greater visibility into their data and make informed decisions in order to achieve a competitive advantage. Our strategic offerings are designed to deliver speed to value, improve business outcomes, and unify teams around a common view of trusted insights. If you have any questions about CCG, our information will be on the last slide of the presentation, or you could visit us at ccganalytics.com. Now to introduce you to our speaker today. Natalie Greenwood is a multifunctional executive who has managed global projects and programs across IT and business environments. Her background is in strengthening teams and leveraging internal cross-functional staff to achieve common goals. Natalie currently serves at CCG as a client partner, leading data management, analytics strategy, and data governance programs for customers across the U.S. I'll now pass the mic over to Natalie to dive into the content.
Very good. Thank you, Mary Ann. Okay, so today we're going to talk, as Mary Ann just said, about the risk of purchasing metadata management technology prior to having an operating model or data governance program enabled in general in your organization. So we'll get into some background around that. We'll talk about CCG's 5 core areas of data governance, so the different areas that we at CCG focus on in our program management enablement functions. Why starting with the technology is risky. We're going to then deep dive into program management and metadata management, and then we'll talk about some of the considerations in metadata. All right, so just some quick background here. Over and over again, we hear from our different clients some of the challenges they're having with the technology that they purchased. So they've gone out, they've procured technology to support their metadata management problems or challenges, solve those problems. And they've had a really hard time enabling them. They don't have the right people in place. They maybe don't have the processes or workflows identified or documented properly. And so that technology that was procured and has been enabled and IT is now administering is just sitting on the shelf. No one's actually using it. And so obviously that's a huge challenge, not just from the IT's perspective of having to continue to administer and support these expensive technologies, but also in the fact that there's really not any business value being added for that cost that's associated with that. So what we're seeking to do through our program and our enablement of program management is to reduce that risk. And we're suggesting, in our point of view in general, is you should always start with the program management function of data governance, the operating model, and then back into the metadata management technologies. And I'll go further into the deck and explain why. But before I do that, I want to level set. From a data governance perspective, if you were to go out and Google all the different frameworks for data governance, you're going to find probably 15 to 20 different types. So if you're in healthcare, you'll see AHIMA's version, CMI has a version, you'll see the DAMA wheel. There's a lot of really great methodologies and frameworks out there. They're very comprehensive, and they take a very long time, depending on which one you use to assess your organization, because they're so comprehensive. So what we did at CCG is we came up with a slimmed down version of all of those different models, and we're focused on 5 key areas. And these are the 5 key areas that we've heard repeatedly from our own clients are the biggest challenges that they're having, and also the hardest areas that they have in terms of enabling data governance. So if we start at the center of what we're calling it the donut, if we start at the center, we have the program management function, and that's where we're really focused on your people, your processes, your workflows, your organizational readiness, preparedness, budgets, things of that nature, everything that's foundational to data governance and having an actual program in place that you can then use to optimize and enable these other areas on the outside, which include metadata management, your data architecture, your security, privacy, and data quality. So on the next slide, and we're going to share this with everyone after the webinar, but this is kind of the breakout of how we envision and how we assess organizations around data governance. So we have those 5 competencies that I just explained on the previous slide. And within each of those competencies, we have markers. And we use those markers to help rate and determine where an organization is currently tracking from a data governance perspective within that competency, and how through our recommendations to get them to the next level. So today we're going to focus on the center of the donut, because obviously without that foundational layer, you can't do the other things well. And then we're going to focus on the upper left-hand corner today of the metadata. And what you're seeing on the left-hand side, data dictionary, glossaries, asset catalogs, that's all the different types of technologies that we've heard from clients that they've gone out and procured without having that center of the donut already fully baked or enabled, if you will. And that's where the challenges have come in. So we're going to go ahead and deep dive into each of those, the program management function and metadata management. So let's first talk about metadata management. I'm sure you've heard this 100 times. What is the definition of metadata? It's data about data. And I personally am so tired of hearing that, because it's actually, there's a lot more to it. Metadata is the data that describes all aspects of an enterprise information assets. So it's not just the data about the data, but people, it's sometimes hard to kind of comprehend what it is, because it is such a large definition, if you will, and it does involve so much across the different operational areas and within your data lifecycle that it can be confusing. But we want to strip that down as much as possible. So on the next slide, I'm going to explain to you the 3 different types of metadata. So you have business metadata, which is more on the business side. It's business level concepts. It's business terms and their definitions. So a lot of times that would fall into a data catalog or a business catalog, if you will. Then you have the technical metadata, which falls more on the IT side. So in a lot of these different operating systems that are enabled within IT, there is technical metadata that's automatically being collected and stored somewhere, and it may not be something that anyone's accessing or using, but it's definitely there. That truly is the data about the data within maybe a database or a database table or a schema, if you will. So that's your more technical metadata. And then you have your operational metadata, and that's where the data itself is moving across the entire organization. So just because it comes in through one operating system doesn't mean that it's going to come right back out through that same system. It may go through several different transformations throughout different systems before it even is consumed by an end user. So as you can see, metadata, it does literally hit every aspect of your organization, and it hits it from a business, a technical, and an operational perspective. So from a definition perspective, it can be confusing, and that's why we're trying to kind of level set here in this discussion. So we've talked about the types of metadata and what metadata is, but where is metadata? So within your organization, it's everywhere. It's in people's heads, and sometimes, unfortunately, some of those people decide to leave the company and take it with them. In the best case scenario, it's actually written down or tracked in some type of technology where you can actually get to it and leverage it at some point. But and then again, on other occasions, it's in a repository or in a database. So it's everywhere. It's literally everywhere. You can call metadata a printout, if you will. If you walk by someone's desk and you see a printout of an invoice, that's metadata. That's information about whatever that customer or client had purchased within that invoice. So a lot of information is being stored, it's being collected, and it's quite frankly accessible to a lot of people across the organization. And that's why it's so important. And that's why so many organizations are so eager to go out and purchase technology and get out ahead of it and find ways to actually document and store and maintain and enhance this information in a more technical way instead of trying to do it manually. We understand that. However, in order to do that, there are a few things that you need to consider first to be successful. So as I alluded to earlier, metadata is more than just technology. So if you want or need a data dictionary, in order to keep that dictionary up to date and referenceable and usable, you're going to have someone at some point define the actual definitions that go into the dictionary. And in addition, you're going to need them to help with keeping that updated. And that there's a whole approval process that would have to go on in order to modify or enhance a definition. So it's not just I purchased technology that has data dictionary and I turned it on and it's now just working. There's this whole people and process side of it that has to be considered. Same thing with a business glossary. You have to have the business involved. You have to have their context and their definitions and their workflows and their approval processes baked in order to make that even remotely useful. Data asset catalog. The more assets that you create and the more data assets that are being consumed, the more there is to maintain. And in some cases, you can turn on and track the different data assets that are being maybe published to a Power BI workspace. And that's great. But at some point, you still want someone to go in and analyze those catalogs and analyze those workspaces and see what can be potentially disposed of, or maybe is being really something that's accessed on a more frequent basis that could be shared across the organization. So again, there's this opportunity to have interaction, but if you just turn it on and do nothing with it, then it's truly not adding any value to your organization. Data lineage is even more complex because not only do you have to be able to load it and track it, and there's the different technologies that plug in to make that happen, but it also, just like anything else, needs to be updated and refreshed. So again, I continue to reiterate that there's more to this than just technology. And the data standards themselves, these have to be written, they have to be approved, and at some point, someone needs to ensure that they're being adhered to. So again, that's people and process. So at the end of the day, metadata management requires people, process standards, and workflows to be successful. And that's why if you don't have that foundational layer in place first, you're going to really struggle with leveraging this technology. So that's where our program management function comes in, and why at CCG we think it's so important to have this outlined and enabled before you do anything at all from an enterprise level with data governance. And so some of the things that we're looking at from a program management perspective and enablement perspective is, what is your org structure? Do you have the right people in place to even support data governance / metadata management? Are you prepared? Are you ready? Do you have sponsorship? Do you have budget? Are people on board across the different business units that actually have to take action to, enhance or collect or create or maintain any of these different types of metadata technologies that you're turning on? What's the strategic positioning? Is everyone aligned? Do you have people within the organization that are naysayers, that are really not interested in using metadata management? Are they going to be blockers to leveraging this technology? Because if they are, you really need to have that solved before you procure technology and attempt to use it. You really, really need everyone's buy-in to make this work. And then you need to make sure everyone's, has the education and training, that they understand what their roles are, that they understand that, yes, you're going to procure the technology, you're going to turn it on, and that this is, A and B and C is what they're going to need to do in order to enhance and maintain it. Additionally, metadata management and the technology without policies and procedures is very risky. You really do need to have these defined, outlined, approved, adhered to ensure that the metadata and the information that you're collecting is protected, and that people understand the importance of keeping it up to date and why. So program management must come first, or else your strategy will have no one to execute on it as it relates to the technology itself. So when we measure program management using a capability maturity model, if you look at the different levels here, we basically, on a scale of 1 to 5 is how we're looking at this. Most organizations we're meeting with today are really still in the 1 to 2. I've even had organizations ask me if there was a 0. I mean, there's a lot of organizations that just haven't been able to stand up data governance yet at an enterprise level. But for those of you that are at a level 3, you have the sponsorship, you've got it defined, business units are encouraged and are mostly adhering, and adoption in those critical business units has started. At that point, you've got the people in place, the operating model in place, you've got the right business units, the critical business units they've bought into this, the idea of this. You've got the workflows defined, the standards. At that point, at a level 3 and above is when we think you really should start looking at procuring technology. Before that, there's just a lot of work that needs to be done in the program management component to get you to the point where you're really ready. So technology is a big decision as well. And the last thing we want you to do is to obviously just go out and purchase any technology. We want you to really think about, what are the capabilities that your organization even needs? Do you need a dictionary and data lineage? Or maybe you don't. Maybe you just need a report catalog or glossary. But depending on what you need and how much of it you need and the way it's going to work within your organization, you may or may not need to spend a lot of money. And so, when you're looking at the cost considerations across the capabilities that you need and the, 10 to 20 different types of technologies that are out there, there's a lot of things that need to be considered. Additionally, you've got to really factor in your solution provider. So depending on if your organization's a build or buy, or if you're already working with a certain software vendor. Maybe you already are using a tool like Irwin for your data modeling. These are all things you need to factor in before actually procuring technology. And in the background here in blue, we have an example of a scorecard we did just internally at CCG to try to understand the different vendors and how we felt that they scored, and sort of how where they are at on the Gartner model and their cost, just for our own for our own information. But if you're an organization looking to procure technology specifically to solve a problem, then you really need to dig deep into the different capabilities you need. And that takes time, that takes people, and it's certainly not just an IT discussion. It's something where the business needs to be enabled as well. So, in other words, don't get the cart before the horse. People process first. So, going back to your operating model and that program management function, having a committee or a council, data owners and stewards assigned is key. Having the folks in the right place to make the right decisions to enable these different controls that this technology is going to provide to you is absolutely key. You have to have that in place before you move forward. And here's where I just want to give an example of one technology at one of our clients. The technology was turned on and they were really excited about it. And then they sat down and they started to kind of back into the things that we've talked about today that really need to happen, which is your people, your process, and your workflow. And they very quickly realized this is not a plug and play technology. And I'm not going to sell out the technologist or the software provider because it's irrelevant. Any one of the technologies you have does require this internal decision making workflow and process. And so when we started to map out what theirs would look like for a simple definition, this is one metadata definition within a data dictionary. This is the workflow. These are all the different steps that someone needs to go through in order to get it approved and put into the technology and considered in production. It's not easy. It takes time and it takes a lot of coordination. And so that's why we want to point this out, because again, if you've got the technology and you don't have all of this worked out, you have technology that's you're paying for, you're paying a monthly licensing fee for, and you really can't do anything with it until you have the rest of this worked out. So again, if you do this first, then when you procure the technology, you're ready to go, you're rocking and rolling, you can actually take advantage of some of the capabilities. Okay, so just a recap of today, we covered a lot. But hopefully, the big takeaway here is that you having your operating model defined and enabled is key, which means you need your people identified, processes defined. You need to have a workflow. What is that going to look like? And a lot of that you can do using Excel, SharePoint. I've seen people use OneDrive. If you need a data dictionary, start with Excel, put it on SharePoint, design a workflow, get your approvals and process, and make sure people are actually going to use it before you go out and spend 30,000 or more on technology that can do what you're already doing in Excel and SharePoint. I'm not saying that's a great long-term solution for an organization that's fully bought in and on board, but it's a good way to gauge your readiness within the organization before taking the plunge and spending the big dollars. And then lastly, this is when you're ready. You're at a level 3, you have everything in place that we've talked about. You've conducted the assessment around the types of technology. Now it's a great time to start looking at your procurement processes. Okay, so at that point, I'm going to turn it back over to Mary Ann for a Q&A.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Natalie, for that awesome content. We do have a couple questions coming in, which I'll kind of go through with you. One of them being, I've already purchased metadata management software. What do I do now?
That's exactly right. So we have run into that situation, and it is what it is. You've already got it. It's sitting on the shelf. Let's activate quickly. So one of the things that we can do to support you with that is we can help you. We can help organize and identify the folks that need to be part of your operating model so that you can assign those data owners and those stewards, define those roles, help them, train and onboard and help them understand their responsibilities, design the workflows, and start to put that technology to work. But truly, I mean, you're never going to get around the need for actually setting up your operating model.
Another thing that an individual brought up was buy-in. So whether that be through stakeholders or peers, they're curious about how do they get buy-in from the entire organization and where do they start?
Okay, yep. And that's a big part of what we do at CCG and through our discovery sessions and our assessments. And we have even a program, an accelerator program we call the Rapid DG. It's an accelerated way to assess your organization in a very short period of time. Within 6 weeks, we can help you identify and set up your operating model, but also produce a 12-month roadmap for you. And as part of that process, we are working with folks across all of your different operational areas, and we're talking to them about the importance of data governance. So that change management component's happening through the discovery sessions. I would say, in lieu of having that assessment occurring, it's really going to be important to find those folks within your organization that are excited about data governance, that do understand the need for those controls. And most of the time in those scenarios, I would start with someone in finance, because if anyone understands how important the quality of your data is, it's going to be someone who's working with numbers all day long.
So when people usually understand more about that, the light bulb goes off, or is it like you still, it's kind of an uphill battle?
That's exactly, yeah. So once people are starting to understand what is even involved in data governance and what it means, that definitely they're absolutely bought in, especially if you can help, give them a use case that's very specific to their situation or scenario.
Another question coming in is, I know DG is important, but my company has gone through this before and honestly is facing fatigue. How do you overcome data governance fatigue?
That's so funny. So I did a actual there's a video out there where I actually talked about DG fatigue, and it's common. I mean, we've seen it over the probably the past 5 to 7 years, where organizations got really excited about data governance. They spent a lot of time assessing their organization. They came up with some really awesome roadmaps, truly really good roadmaps, actionable roadmaps. But then by the time they delivered the message and provided it to the people that we're going to be able to take action on it, the funds or the budget for that actual enablement or work had already been reappropriated. So one of the things I would say is, yes, I get it. DG fatigue is very real. And that's why, if you were going to kick off another initiative around data governance and you really do want to get that buy-in, you're going to have to do it quickly. You're going to have an actionable roadmap, and you're going to have to actually have taken some type of action on that roadmap almost immediately following the development of it. And again, that's why we go down the approach of having this accelerated program, because 6 weeks is just enough to get buy-in. But by the 8th week, when we're actually taking action and enabling something within data governance, maybe it's a data dictionary or something else, maybe it's just training around data governance, that's when people start to get excited and really believe it's going to happen.
Going back to program management, one question was, am I going to have to hire people, or should I be leveraging folks internally and retrain them?
And I think that depends. So I've seen it both ways. I've had organizations that have told me, we have the budget, we do not have the skill set in house. We really want to work with CCG, help us enable. And we've spent a lot of time on site working with their folks and helping to enable the different components of the roadmap. There's other situations where budgets are lean. I mean, let's face it, it is hard to get financing for data governance. It just is. And so we've had to work with the folks that we have in house as the full-time employees. And so what we do as part of our engagement, and or especially during that 6-week program, is we're spending time onboarding, training, kind of raising the data literacy within your organization, so that when we give you this actionable roadmap, you have folks internally that can carve out a little bit of their time. We realize they have day jobs, but just enough of their time, maybe it's 5 to 10% of their role, to work on data governance. Because the reality is, at the end of the day, everyone is accountable and responsible for the data that they're using, consuming, entering, and disposing of. So you're already doing the job. It's just a matter of really putting some boundaries around it and helping people understand that truly the work that they're doing is already data governance.
I've launched a data governance program before, but now the organization is stuck. How can we move forward? I know this one you probably get a lot too.
Yeah, we do. And so that goes back to the DG fatigue. So I think having that actionable roadmap, having clearly defined roles and responsibilities, having the assignments made in advance so that people understand what's expected of them, and then being able to show that you actually were able to, successfully either enable something or execute on something, is going to be key. Because at the end of the day, people really do want to see that, you've said you're going to do something, and you did it. So that's kind of the point to having that roadmap and holding yourself or your partner accountable.
Awesome. Thank you so much. All right, and to our viewers, thank you so much for joining us for today's webinar. If you have any questions about today's topic or would like to hear other topics on data strategy, feel free to contact us at info@ccganalytics.com. Otherwise, you'll be receiving an email in the next 24 hours with a recording and the slides used for today's presentation. Additional information can also be found on our data governance page located at ccganalytics.com/dg. Thank you so much for joining us.